Welcome back to Conejo Valley Visionaries, where we spotlight local entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community leaders making an impact in the Conejo Valley. Today, I'm excited to chat with Timmy Heague, the owner of Arsenal Comics and Games in Newbury Park and Ventura. Timmy has built a thriving comic and gaming store that's become a hub for the community. We'll talk about his journey as a young entrepreneur, lessons in using social media to grow small businesses in Southern California, and what it takes to create a community-focused local business. Whether you're a fan of comics and games, an aspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about what it takes to build a community-focused business, you're going to love this conversation. Let's dive in. If you enjoy this episode and find value in the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and rating. This helps more people find the podcast, and therefore each story can reach more folks in the Conejo Valley. You're not going to want to miss our last Conejo Valley Visionaries live event of 2025. It's going to be a really special evening filled with delicious food and drinks, great conversation, and of course, a live interview with the owner of one of your favorite local destinations. If you're interested in getting first access to tickets, please DM me the word invite on Instagram at Conejo Valley Visionaries, and you'll get the link before it goes live to the public. Thanks again for your support this year, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. Hey, Timmy, welcome to Conejo Valley Visionaries.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to get to know you and your business. And as we always like to do here, we want to go back to the beginning. What did you want to be when you grew up? As I understand it, you grew up out here. Is that right? In the Conejo Valley?
Yeah. So my connection to Conejo Valley was my mom and dad are from England. They immigrated over here, and what I thought was completely normal, apparently it's not. My mom's an identical twin, and she had a twin wedding. Apparently that's not common, as I found out growing up. And so my mom's sister, my aunt, who, fun fact, I look more like than my own mom. Identical twin stuff's weird. They lived in the Conejo Valley. So every Saturday we'd come up to Marge and Paul's house up in Newbury Park. And yeah, that was how I grew up in the Conejo Valley. I got the best of both worlds, both sides of Ventura County. And yeah, it's just such a nice, lovely place. And, it's pretty wild, like thinking back to my childhood that like 50 or whatever, I'd own a business here. And now for a decade plus I have. And what I wanted to be when I grew up, oh gosh. When I found out you couldn't actually be Batman when you grew up, probably after that, I was pretty always gung-ho and wanting to be a writer for movies and television comics, which kind of has worked out okay for me in the end. But then my old man's a small business owner, retail shop, surplus store. And so I always had this small business background of just, what the concept is of owning a small business retail store and the logistics. And I grew up working at the local comic shop that I frequented as a kid. And so it really didn't take me until probably late teens to realize, yeah, this is probably what I need to do one day.
Interesting. Wow. So
Yeah.
it's always, I love hearing what people want to be when they grew up, just because sometimes it's so vastly different than where
Oh,
you
for
landed.
sure.
But for you, at least, yes,
Yeah.
I know we'll get into it, but you're writing, but also owning a comic shop. So to
Yeah.
be able to marry those two things, and I feel like those are all sort of kid dreams, even if it's not a superhero, like
Oh,
that's
for
something that like a
sure.
kid really would imagine themselves. Like it almost feels like a fantasy.
Yeah, and that right there too is like you kind of like said it perfectly because like owning a small business can be something where some days you're frustrated, you're stressed out, maybe you're bummed, you want to pull your hair out. But one thing that kind of keeps me centered is like, wow, the kid I was 15, 20 years ago would be really stoked, like, and really happy. Even on our worst day, like that kid would be like, whoa. So that's always something that kind of, is like the Popeye and the spinach for me.
Good for you. I love that you can have that
Yeah.
perspective. So
Oh, for
at
sure.
age, you said like when you were a teenager, you had this
Yeah.
idea, and it wasn't shortly after not being a teen that you opened Arsenal. Is that right?
Yeah, I opened up on my 22nd birthday, which looking back, I just, is just so wild. I don't like looking back now, having that perspective of 11 years later, I'm just like, what was I thinking? Wow. But I was a young, really committed energized kid. And I I did this crazy thing where like I looked at like my comic book heroes, how they like make commitments and vows to themselves to get like a mission done. And I was like, as
Mm.
corny as it sounds, I was like, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. And I, from age 19 to 21, really minimized my social life immensely. I wasn't a total recluse or anything, but like pretty much every night and every morning, I'd be spending at a coffee shop working on my business plan, or any other factors involved in like getting things going. And then in the daytime to late afternoon, early evening, I worked my shifts. I worked at my local comic shop. I worked odd jobs. I was hustling, buying and reselling comics so that I would get at swap meets, yard sales, which I know it's only a decade ago, but like back then it was so much easier for a guy like me to do because now there's like apps that like tell everyone what the valuable comics are, the sought after
Mm.
ones. And even just a decade ago, it was a completely different world where I was able to like turn $100 into 600-700 bucks like really easily. And yeah, I mean I've always been like a little weirdo like that. Like my eBay account for my store, it says a member since like 2006, 2007, which like makes no
Early.
sense because my store opened in 2014. And when I was a kid, getting like first getting into comics at age 8, there used to be this thing called Wizard Magazine. And Wizard Magazine was something that like kept you up to date on what was hot, what was valuable in collectibles, comics and toys. And so what I would do is I would get my allowance and I would buy like a second copy of something, a second toy, and I would resell it on eBay. So then I could just buy more comics and toys. And yeah, so that mentality has kind of just always been within me. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I just like the art of just they call it art of the flip in this industry. And yeah, I when I was 20, I got pretty close to just like, man, I really got to do this. I really got to do this. I'm putting in all this time, all this energy. I was a wedding musician at the time as well. So I was making extra money doing that at nights and just really stockpiling it. And all people always ask me, like, did you sell your own comic book collection to make your store? And what's wild is at the time, it was no. At the time, I still had my comic book collection. But after I opened up and I just saw people buying comics out of my showcase, my bins, my back wall, I was like, I don't even like the character Deadpool that much. Why do I own a copy of the first appearance of Deadpool? I think I'm just gonna sell it. And then like I went from having 2 rooms of comics to then like 4 boxes in a year. I just was like, okay.
Getting back to the community.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yes.
So what
It's
I have a
yeah,
question. Or
yeah,
so
yeah,
when you were 19, 20,
yeah.
you're working on this business plan of your comic book shop. What was the idea back
So
then?
the idea, I'm happy to say, has kind of stayed the same to what we are now. Now, granted, we've had a couple modifications, changes through the years. I'm a big believer in adapt or die. You always got to be evolving. You got to always be a ball. Like somebody said to me years ago when I was just starting up, don't just don't just keep your eye on the ball. Be the ball. Always be moving. And that really stuck with me. And so, back then, my goal was to have a comic shop in the area that was clean, friendly, vibrant, accessible, and most important, prominent online as well. Because at that time, the comic shop I worked at in Ventura was the only comic shop in the entire county. It was, while I enjoyed, my time there and valued it, it was never really the store I wanted to open up. It was just
Mm.
unfortunately your classic stereotypical comic shop, and that was never going to be something I wanted to put my name on. And so, clean store, organized. My philosophy is comics are for everyone. It's my favorite art form, my favorite medium of storytelling. And I wanted any kid, any teenager, any adult, anybody of any age, any background, whatever, to come in my store and find the story, find the comic that they could connect with. And you can't do that if you have a dusty, gross store that's not organized and not have good staff. And so that was always part of it for me. And I'm really proud to say I've stuck to that. I'm really adamant about that. I know it's going to sound so crazy, but I truly believe, like, if someone asked me why I was put on this earth, I think it was not to just sell or write comic books. I think it was to, like, promote this medium as much as possible and, like,
Yeah.
get it in people's hands as much as possible. Because I truly think comics are the best. It's just, I dedicated my life to them for a reason. And I
Yeah.
just want to do whatever I can to be the person that puts as much comics in people's hands as possible. And it doesn't
I
even have to be for sale. We have free comic book day every year. That's a huge event. I do school events once a month where I promote literacy and pass out comics. Like, I just love promoting comics.
it's really interesting. I have young kids, they're 7,
Yeah.
and I think comic books at this stage where they're, learning to read,
Yeah.
getting interested in reading is such a smart way to sort of get them
Yeah.
excited because of the illustrations.
Absolutely.
And have you noticed since you were growing up
Yeah.
attracted to comic books to
Yeah.
now? Have there been changes in trends or an
Oh,
increase
for
in?
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like any industry, it's like anything. Like, there's always a zeitgeist. It's always ever changing. And that's a part of our job too, is like staying on the pulse of it as a retail store. And even me as like a writer or just a store owner, you always got to keep your eye on the things that people are gravitating towards. And it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's easier than others, sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes you miss it. Sometimes you miss a wave and you're like, whoa, people are into that. Okay, let's try and get it in store. But yeah, I think what's really interesting is the norm, and something I'm super, super happy about is the normalization of graphic novels, comic books and book bound form at schools, at libraries, like the
Yeah.
Raina Talgmeyer stuff, the Babysitter Club stuff, Captain Underpants, Dogman, like those are all comic books.
Yeah.
And when I was about 6 or 7, I wasn't really vibing to reading. My parents noticed this, that I was struggling with reading, but they also, like good parents, noticed what I was into. And at that time, Star Wars was just re-released in theaters in 1997 and 8, and I was obsessed with it. And there was Batman, Spider-Man, and X-Men on Saturday morning cartoons that just my eyeballs were glued to the screen. And on a whim, my dad was like, well, let's try the comic books. I couldn't take my hands off them, my eyeballs off them. And that really accelerated me as a reader to the point where, like, when I was in elementary school, they had like what was called APR, AP reading. It was something where, like, you read books and then you took a test on it in your school library and you accumulated points, and it was like a really fun contest. And I was like second place in third grade. Like, I went from second grade not caring about reading to like being like,
Yeah.
okay, let's read it all.
Tell me, when you had this idea, you're basically
Mm,
living that dream of what you originally decided with
mm,
your business plan. You opened your first location in Newbury Park in 2014. What was that like?
yes. It was wild. Nobody believed I was doing it. My parents didn't believe it. My friends didn't believe it. A select few did. And funny enough, those are the ones that like helped me paint the store, do the flooring, help with my grand opening. And then, like, 3 weeks into announcing, like, hey, we're doing a grand opening party, everyone really believed it. Yeah, it was just crazy. Like, I was 21 turning 22. All my friends were from high school were still in college, and I went gung-ho on starting my small business dream, and it was just wild. It was just a wild time in my life, and I still can't believe I did it and pulled it off. And most importantly, I can't believe I am still around. Like, most small
Yeah.
businesses fail in a year. Most small businesses, fail in 5 years. I've survived the fires in both of my towns. Like, I have survived COVID. Like, I have survived personal matters in my life that would have, like, affected my small business. I've like, yeah, I just sometimes, like, I get like, whew, like, wow, I'm exhausted, but I'm like, wow, maybe I still do have the same like energy and resilience as that 22-year-old kid. I don't know, or so I tell myself in denial anyway. But yeah,
No, it's
2014.
incredible.
Thanks. Yeah, it was 2014, and it was just magical. It just, yeah, I'm very thankful we had, because I was the first comic book store really to utilize social media and utilizing that in my marketing. Like, I had this line wrapped around the shopping center. It was insane. And I had comic creator guests that I was friends with. Nobody else was doing social media like that. And I just was like, I can use this as a business tool. Oh yeah, I'm going to. And yeah, I've
Yeah.
just always never stopped like trying to figure out like in my industry in comic books, what I've noticed is like I'll do something on social media and it catches on and other stores start doing it. And then I'm like, okay, well then I got to do something new. And then 6 months to a year later, I notice, okay, now they're doing it. And it's been really funny because like I'm flattered, but then I'm like, okay, well now it's time for me to reinvent myself and what I'm doing online. And it's, it always keeps
Yeah.
it fresh as well for the followers and the viewers and the fans and customers.
What's the current social media marketing trend that you're really enjoying right now?
Um, I like how so one of the things I started off doing was silly videos.
Mm,
And people liked them, but they never went viral or anything. Like people talked about them, appreciated them, but like we're famous for Christmas commercials. When we first started, we did crazy elaborate Christmas commercials with like insane quality set work, actors. Like I went all out, and
mm.
they were elaborate. And I do silly videos through the years, but like now I'm fascinated how like that's the normal now for businesses to be like viral online, like the trend videos and just like funny humor. And I'm all for it.
Yeah.
That's super me. But like we've been doing that regularly like since day one. So now I'm just like, well, what do I do now to freshen up? What do I now do to like stand, apart from everyone else? And it's really interesting. And it's always interesting to see what videos we do that really hit with people and what videos that other people do, whether it's, a food business, coffee, comics, or clothing, whatever. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
what I've learned. It's always the ones you least expect to do the big numbers.
Hmm. Interesting. At what point did you open your second location?
2018,
Oh, so not too
which
long
was
after. Wow.
no, I So a big part of I think my success is I lived super minimally as an early teen, as an early 20s to mid 20s. I put all my money into the business. Some days, some weeks it was harder than others, easier than others, but I was really committed to the dream. And I was a big believer in what I was described to as the McDonald's method, that the success of having another store and opening up another and furthering your brand would just overall help. It very
Yeah.
much did. It was very hard because I've soon learned that opening up a second location is really, really when it gets real. And it goes from you
Mhm.
owning a small business to this whole other animal. And I it, I had ups and downs. It wasn't really until 2021 I really think I figured it out. Now granted COVID, definitely was a thing in between all that. But what I always say when people ask me about my second location is my experience with that was always so many lessons and so many like no way this could have happened like but it did. So after opening up my second location in my hometown of Ventura, a month later, the shooting in Thousand Oaks happened at Borderline, and then 2 days after that, the mass fires happened. And I had like my store, area was in a neighborhood in Newbury Park at the time that had to be evacuated. All my customers were evacuated. I had customers who lost their homes. It was rough. I went from just like putting in all this money to a second location, and then for a month, my first location was making no money. And
Mm.
it was so like, it was a lot to navigate. And thankfully, I figured it out, and thankfully I was able to adjust. But it was a huge learning experience, and I absolutely learned that like when you open up a second location, like you have to think like worst case scenario. What happens if you don't? I mean, really business in general, like you always got to have a cash cow. You got to have just a savings of just what happens if there's no cash flow and just if things don't work out. And I'm very thankful things did work out. We had support from the community. We were supporting the community. We were doing, events to help with the fires. And, it was something. It was a wild time, and I learned a lot. And I learned just, yeah. I'm very thankful for how everything turned out. I really
Yeah.
am.
Yeah, well, I can only imagine. Yeah, that's a lot to navigate.
Yeah,
And goodness, right after you open the second spot, but it sounds like now having both locations open,
yeah.
it's so nice to be able to have them in the two sort of areas that you grew up
Oh, for
in. I
sure.
imagine, I imagine a comic book store. I mean, any retail space, right, is pretty capital intensive because you have to
Yes.
own or you have the book. So that's
Hmm.
you've always managed to be able to like keep that within your own
Yeah.
like ecosystem of like investing back into the business.
Yeah. Comics come out every Wednesday. So
Oh,
that's the big cash flow. Yeah, new releases are every Wednesday. So New Comic Book Day Wednesday is a big deal for us. That's probably our busiest day of the week, but it can fluctuate between that or a Saturday. So that's the big one we deal with, which we promote heavily online and email blasts, and people can reserve and pre-order and fun stuff like that. Everyone wants to know what Batman's up to. He's a popular guy. But there's other great comics coming out every Wednesday too, of course, and every genre, publishers, characters. But the other thing we do heavily with is card games like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. That is a
of course.
huge one for us. And
Okay.
then, sorry, I'm like giving you everything in order now. I'm sorry. I know that wasn't the question, but I'm just giving you the breakdown.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
graphic
interesting.
graphic novels is number three, which is the collected form of comic books where it has an entire story. The best way I describe graphic novels since day one is think of it like Netflix. Your single issue comic is an episode, like this right here is a episode of a TV show, and then a graphic novel, which is the thing with the thicker spine, a book with a thicker spine. That's the season of the TV show. That's the whole story encapsulated for you. And yeah, so that's really like our number three, because like those come out all the time, newly released things, but like there's just the most famous comic book stories of all time, and that's how those get collected. Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns,
Right.
and then the fourth thing I would say is the collectible side of things, like collectible old comics, vintage books. And
Yeah.
yeah, selling all of those things. And yeah, it's how we keep the lights on.
It's incredible.
Yeah, thanks.
It sounds like you also, in addition to running two
Yeah,
successful stores, you
yeah.
also are a comic book writer. Is that something
Yes.
that you've done throughout, or has that been a recent new addition
I've
to your?
Yeah, 3 years now professionally, and I'm very proud and thankful to say that I've done a lot in those 3 years. How I find the time amongst everything, is always a never-ending mystery, but I do it. I've been writing professionally for Archie Comics the most. I've written for Dark Horse, Mad Cave. I recently, as of this weekend, so you guys are the first people to tell, started my first thing with Image, which is one of the biggest publishers in comics. But Dark Horse and
Congratulations.
Archie are, of course, big too. Thank you. But yeah, it's
So, well,
it's never ever ending.
Archie was my entree into comic books. That was
Love
like
it.
how
Love it.
those were actually the only comic books I think I read as a kid, just because they were
Awesome.
always on
Oh
sale
yeah,
at the grocery store and checkout.
absolutely.
And that was my obsession. I actually just bought my
I
kids
love
their
it.
first Archie comic book, and it's
Oh, I love that.
yeah, that was always my go-to. I love them. So that's very cool that you're writing for them.
Yeah, they were my first, and I've been writing for them consistently since. And I love Riverdale. I love the characters. I love writing all different genres with them. I like writing the traditional humor stuff with them. They have a horror line. I love writing the characters in horror situations. And then right now, the one that's being currently published, I co-wrote it with actor comedian Patton Oswalt. He has his own line at Dark Horse Comics of supervillain universe called Minor Threats, which is action packed. It's funny, it's smart, it's original, and having them cross over with Archie is the most unlikely crossover possible, but we're making it work. And the Archie side of things is my definitive take on the character. My like, this is why I love Archie so much. This is why he's my guy. And yeah, it's great. I love it. I'm having time of my life.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I love that you get to do
Thanks.
all these various parts of who you
And
are and bring
yeah.
them to life. What has been the most surprising thing to you about running your own businesses?
Oh gosh. I'm flashing through 11 years of my life now. You know, the first thing that comes to mind, and it's going to make me sound like a Hallmark movie, but when I opened up, I did not think, and I should have, I really should have, because this happened to my old man with his business, that when I opened up, I didn't realize that I would form relationships, friendships that would be lifelong friends from beginning to end.
With your
And I'm,
customers
yeah, and
or
it
employees
became
too?
not just customers, but like just it became more than that. They want, they came from customers and supporters of the shop to, people whose weddings I've gone to people whose baby showers I've been to, people who you know, I'm very, very, very thankful for it. To me, by the end of the day, it's always been about the people and the relationships that I've met along the way that I really, really value. I mean, a couple of my best friends are thanks to me opening up the store, and it's something I find very special and value.
What's been the most challenging part of this?
Um, you know, I think after all this time now, I think I can absolutely say I'm a big believer that when you're in your 20s, I think you're really, truly still figuring things out within yourself. I think the 20s are like an extension of the teenage years, uh, for better or for worse. And I, I, I would recommend that like owning a small business is not is not something maybe a super young person should do because you are still figuring things out within yourself. And the moments of navigating my life and things happening within your life and still having to be a small business owner, to be the boss, has been such an experience, for better or for worse. And I've learned a lot. And it's been hard navigating the moments in my life, like breakups or health issues with your parents, or just you know moments of hardship in your life, like grief, and how to navigate that, all the while you cannot stop, because if you stop, that affects your business. And the mental health aspects are super important. Like, you got to take care of yourself, but you have to have like things in your business and life implemented so you can have those days off, so you can focus on yourself. And I guess really my advice to a small business owner coming up is always make sure you have a great team, people that you can rely on, people who can watch over things if you ever have a sick parent, or if you ever really need to just focus on yourself. Because being behind that counter while you feel like your world is coming apart is the worst thing, because you've got to keep your game face on. You have to, because like when you're a comic shop or a coffee shop or whatever, like you're a third space, and your vibes like radiate on other people's vibes. And I never want to have someone come through my door and like not be as happy and stoked as possible, because like if the person behind the counter isn't having a good day, then how is the person coming in the store going to have a good day? And that's why I'm like
Mm.
really like when it comes to like being a team leader, if I feel like something's off, they're not having a good day, like if they are burnt out, like that's something that's super important to me, because it's all part of the grand scheme. Their mental health's important. It'll affect the vibe of the store, the work of the store. It can affect the people coming in the store. And like, I just, for the most part in my life, I just want always everyone to be happy in my stores. Well, and outside my stores, of course. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
just super
it's
important.
true. The energy of it, and you mentioned third space. Do you find that a
Hmm.
lot of your customers are kind of hanging out there with you? It's not. It's maybe
Oh,
not as
for
transactional.
sure. That's like the whole point to me of like a local comic shop.
What is your vision for Arsenal?
I want. I think some days I go, "Wow, you're crazy." Some days I go, "Yeah, that's the future." I think I'd probably open up a couple more stores along the coast, and then one day go into licensing the blueprint of Arsenal. Not franchising, but something a little adjacent to that. Um, and then also just growing comic book readership and the store branding, of course, as much as possible. Arsenal is definitely here to stay for a very, very long time. And I I'm a big believer in chapters. I'm a big believer in growth. And as much as I love my two stores, I don't think I have the personality to just only have the two. So I probably want to grow it and keep on growing the brand and just do crazier, more fun things.
So, Timmy, now
Yeah.
my rapid fire questions. Favorite comic book?
Oh, if I had to choose just one, probably Watchmen.
What's one word you'd use to describe the Conejo Valley?
Lovely.
Favorite thing to do in the Conejo Valley?
Have a nice cup of coffee and read or write on a nice, lovely sunny day. That's not too hot, but not too cold. Maybe high 60s.
And do you have a favorite coffee shop or do you make the coffee at home?
I really, in terms of two, I'll give you two answers. I like Five Eleven. I used to play music there when they first opened. That was a lot of fun. I like that place's vibe. I like the coffee. And then nostalgia is a hell of a drug. And lately I find myself having fills because I used to live when I first opened up in Newberry, Thousand Oaks. I used to live off Moore Park Road. And I used to always go to that Starbucks, which is now a Phil's. And so I just like drinking there and I don't know, just being at that shopping center. I don't know. It's just fun. Phil's is pretty cool. I like it. I know it's like a chain, but whatever.
If Arsenal was a graphic novel, what would
Yeah.
the title be?
Um, gosh. Um, I'm actually gonna steal the Office joke from Michael Scott, and I'm just gonna tell you that if I wrote a book, it's gonna be about Arsenal and me owning a small business, and I'm just gonna copy Michael Scott's title of "Somehow I Manage." Because I just always think that's the greatest. Like, I mean, it's funny because it's Michael Scott, but I always just think that's just such a clever name for a book like that.
I love it. And I love Michael Scott in The Office.
Yeah.
So right on. Last question for you. What's one piece of advice you would offer to a first-time entrepreneur?
Think about everything for as long as possible. Don't be cocky. Don't be overconfident. Just because you think you're great, just because you you believe in yourself, still think about things. Still just figure out what your vision is, figure out what your goals are, figure out what you could do if it all goes wrongly, and what you could do to adapt and change. Always feel like just keep your eye on everything possible. To be a small business owner, to be as an entrepreneur, whatever, it's you don't have work life balance. Your work is your life, and your life is your work. And while making sure you do have that work life balance eventually, I truly feel to be as successful as possible at this in your first year to 3, 5 years, you really got to carve that out in your life that this is the mission, this is the goal. You're in it or you're not. If I wasn't in it, I wouldn't be here still. I wouldn't be in this store right now. But in those first 5 years, I was in it fully. No vacations, no, long days, long nights. I was a lot younger, so I had that, that energy. But I would not tell someone to do it if they weren't fully invested in it. Like the concept of having a wife and kids and starting a small business, like I don't know how that happens. I could not do it. I could not fathom it because in those first early years, I was just, I mean, people made jokes that I must have lived in my store. I was spending so much time in there, figuring things out, working on things, figuring out ways to just juvenate as many fun sales and events as possible, and doing social media stuff. And yeah, it was hard, but looking back, I'm so happy I did it because I wouldn't be here if I didn't.
Yeah, 11 years later. Well, kudos to sticking with it and putting all of yourself into it and being able to run your 2 store locations and explore writing. So you're
Yeah.
doing it, man. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you for being on the
Thanks.
podcast. And I can't wait to
Thanks for
continue to
having
see
me.
you live out your vision.
Yeah, I really think Conejo Valley is just a great place to live, have a business, hang out, and I really feel like, I really appreciate what your podcast does because I think there's a lot of special small businesses in this area. I think it's especially tough to have a small business in the Conejo Valley. The rent prices, they're not as cheap as other places in the county. So it's really like you really got to hustle to make it work. You really got to just do something that makes people want to support you. And I really appreciate you spotlighting those businesses because it is more than just a challenge some days.
Yeah. Well, grateful that you're sticking with it, and thank you for everything. Thank you for listening to Conejo Valley Visionaries. If you like today's episode, make sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to rate and review us. That's the best way to support the podcast. To enter our giveaways, learn about local events, and to find out more about each guest, follow at Conejo Valley Visionaries on Instagram. If you want to share your visionary story on the podcast, send us an email. We are always open to guest nominations. Email ConejoValleyVisionaries@gmail.com. This episode was produced by Cristina Dennstedt and Justin K. Sloan. Conejo Valley Visionaries is edited by Justin K. Sloan and J.Sloan Productions.